His group of companies, 21st Century Education, has educated more than 500,000 people around the world, building their financial intelligence with education about finance and investing. The 21st Century Media Group, extending to 12 companies today, operates in a number of different financial markets, including education, investment offerings, financial services, and of course news and media as well. Now, Jamie, I guess one of the appeals for Jamie for his 15-year career in Australia as a public figure is, of course, walking his talk. Now, here's someone who doesn't just talk about what people should be doing or should be looking at or considering. Here's someone who gets in there and makes it happen. Jamie is one of the leading innovators in Bitcoin in the Australian industry particularly. Jamie, aside from the 21st Century Property Group, today has a leading role in a number of organisations in the Bitcoin market. He's the founder of the 21st Century Bitcoin Exchange, founder of the Bitcoin e-network, and he's also one of the leading founders of the organisations bringing Bitcoin ATMs to the Australian market. He's the author of the book Bitcoin, How to Become a Bitcoin Millionaire, Where Is It Leading? And today we're delighted that this event has been made possible by the 21st Century Group and our host, Jamie McIntyre. So to get things off to a great start, please, a warm welcome for Mr. Jamie McIntyre.
Who's excited by Bitcoin? Just a show of hands. I assume that's why you're here. I know the world has many naysayers about Bitcoin, but I guess the world has many naysayers about pretty much everything. Is that true? And where would we be without the opposing views? We look forward to today sharing, I guess, I'll share with you what my views about Bitcoin, why I become involved. You may relate to that. I think everyone has a story, how you first found out about Bitcoin, why you're involved in Bitcoin, and where you see it. But I guess when we look in the world, no one has a crystal ball. Is that true? No one knows exactly where anything will be a year from now, or 5 years from now, 10 years, or let alone Bitcoin. So we can only really base that on, I guess, what we predict to happen. And when I look at anyone's predictions, I'm really looking to see what evidence they back up their predictions to see, does that make sense? And I'm here to say that, I guess I'll share with you, I guess, initially, how I become involved in Bitcoin is that originally I set out with two goals 15 years ago. One of my goals was to transform our outdated 19th century education system and bring it into the 21st century. I've dedicated 15 years of my life as an educator and I developed and created a modern day education system. I went into politics last year, launched a political party with the same agenda to update our education system. The other agenda I've had for 15 years, and I listed as a goal, was to help transform and help be the catalyst to transform our debt-based monetary system, our financial system, our fractional reserve banking system, which many of us are aware is based on debt, is unsustainable and lacks honesty and transparency and has created many issues in the world. I wrote a book, What I Didn't Learn at School but Wish I Had, a little over a decade ago, and I did a chapter on that book about the history of money, because I think so many people, if we're going to understand money or understand future trends such as Bitcoin, it's important to go back into the past. Is that true? To go back into the past to understand the history of money. And I wrote in that chapter and I made a prediction. And I wasn't the only one that made a prediction over 10 years ago to say that before the end of the decade, our current fractional reserve banking system, there will be a crash of epic proportions if something doesn't change with our monetary and banking systems on this planet. And when we move forward by the end of the decade, we know before the end of the decade, by 2008, we had a global credit crisis when that very financial system, that very banking system that we have.
Property and Franchise Expo. We are officially open now, and I hope you have a great day.
Thank you. So yes, if you don't know, you also get access to the expo today if you wish to find out more about that. But I think the action is really in here today. So as we know, the banking system, the financial systems of the world with the credit crash in 2008 was within, few people realize, it was within a matter of hours from absolute chaos, absolute collapse, especially when Lehman Brothers did collapse. Really set off the global credit crisis, but they were so close to imploding and creating effectively another Great Depression. And I don't know about you, but that's pretty scary. That's pretty irresponsible. That's pretty reckless of a system that is in the hands of elite few, a small section of people that really have a monopoly over the issuance of money. If you study the history of wars, if you study the history of money, you will see that the battle has raged for thousands of years over who controls money. Because on this planet, whoever controls the money controls the planet effectively. Does that make sense? Whoever has the power to issue money has the power over our lives, how much we pay for effectively everything, whether it's through interest rates, etc. I believe, and one of the reasons I'm a supporter of Bitcoin and how I become involved in it, is I believe the power and the issuance of money and the power in the financial systems should belong to the people. The power of money should be in the hands of people, not in the hands of a private elite central bankers, not even in the hands of governments who we know are often irresponsible. It should belong in the hands of people. And why I'm excited about Bitcoin? Because that's exactly what it does. It's returning the power of money back to the hands of the people. Just like the internet disrupted the world, is disrupting industry after industry and upsetting the monopoly powers and making it a fair and level playing field, Bitcoin has that potential. So I guess for a lot of people, and I have libertarian views and a lot of libertarians are very supportive of Bitcoin, is a lot of people have only just started to hear about Bitcoin and really just think, is it a way to get rich? Is it a speculative bubble? Is it just a way to invest? They really don't understand that there's a lot more driving Bitcoin. And that's why I believe there's a lot of ignorance in the world about Bitcoin. I'm yet to hear a credible source, a credible individual state a credible case against Bitcoin. Now, we will talk today, and some people might say, well, Warren Buffett came out recently and said Bitcoin is a mirage. And I'm not saying that Warren Buffett isn't credible. Warren Buffett is very credible. I wrote a book about Warren, and I'm a big fan. I made millions of dollars thanks to following Warren's methodology in investing. But we'll look at that today, is that I've never seen a credible person with a credible argument to say reasons why Bitcoin will not work. I'm looking forward to someone presenting that argument, but it hasn't been presented yet. Most people that are naysayers about Bitcoin are simply taking a 50-50 bet. They're taking a 50-50 bet that it might implode and not exist in the future. If they happen to be right, if Bitcoin does implode, they're not going to be right because they have a great deducement and knowledge about the reasons why it failed. They're simply going to be right because they flipped a coin. Does that make sense? Where people that have a credible argument, you'll hear many of them this weekend about the future of Bitcoin and why we are bullish on it, I believe we can back it up with evidence of why it's likely to be a game changer. So I'm excited about Bitcoin. Why? Because I'm excited about changing the financial system on this planet, creating a level playing field and restoring the value of money back into the hands of the people where it belongs. And I think a lot of other people support that. I think also you have to understand this. When the average person on the street eventually understands Bitcoin, apart from the many uses we'll talk about it has today, but the average person, are they more supportive of the banks and the banks have a monopoly over the control of money? The average person, I doubt that. I think the average person is fairly anti-banking. Is the average person happy for governments to completely control money? I would dare say many people are anti-government. Now, I'm not here to suggest that to support Bitcoin, you have to be anti-banking and anti-government. A lot of people are that and support Bitcoin. And I'm not here to say that Bitcoin will ever replace current currency or here to suggest it will ever be the currency. And we have to be anti-banking or anti-government to support Bitcoin. I'm just here to say it's some healthy competition. And I think healthy competition to the banking industry, I think is a good thing. Raise your hand if you would agree with that, by the way. I think it's a good thing. Why should every other industry be disrupted through technology and be forced to lower their prices and forced to deliver a better product or service, and the banking industry be protected from that? Why shouldn't the banking industry be disrupted with new innovative technology that can reduce the cost of transactions around the world, can reduce the cost of you transferring money to people overseas, to make it basically more effective? Why should they be protected from that? And I see no reason they shouldn't be. And let's face it, the banks have known this has been coming for some time. The banks have been well aware that eventually new technology will disrupt them as an intermediary. They didn't necessarily know it was Bitcoin. I don't think anyone saw this little thing called Bitcoin that was a few cents in 2009. And that was, just for nerds and geeks who understood that, that it was going to grow into anything more than something that, was a hobby for a few people. No one saw it coming, but that's pretty much like no one saw the internet coming either. No one saw most great inventions coming until it was too late. Some people say, won't the powers that be that have a monopoly over money or the control and so much to lose, won't they try and stamp out Bitcoin? Well, I think too many people think that people can just control the world they would like. They can't necessarily control it. How can they stop it if they wanted to? They can do their best to stop it, but at the end of the day, some things are outside the power to be to stop things. Does that make sense? Technology will have, it's like saying, the governments are now going to stop the internet. You know, in China, they censor the internet, but they can't stop it. Is that true? If governments wanted to stop the internet, can they really stop it? They don't necessarily have the power because people ultimately have the power. And when people realize they have the power, then I believe the world is a better place and not give away our power continuously. So I guess today what we want to look at is not just the big picture, why I think Bitcoin has a future. It has a future because I believe once enough people realize that it's restoring the power of money back to their hands, that people will be supportive of it. Does it make sense? The average person on the street doesn't understand that yet. They don't really know. There'll be people in this room that go, well, I don't really get Bitcoin. I don't really understand it yet. And I was thinking about this. Well, even if you don't really get Bitcoin, I don't know about you, but I don't really get Twitter either. I still don't really get Twitter. I'm on Twitter. I use it, but I still don't really get it. I still don't really, you know, what's Twitter about? I know the media like Twitter, I know politicians like Twitter, I know celebrities like Twitter, but really I just don't quite get it. But just because I don't get Twitter, does that mean it's not worth anything? Who can tell me what Twitter's stock valuation, its market cap is today? Anyone take a guess? I have no idea, but I think it's in excess of $20 billion. Would that be a fair enough guess? So even though I don't get Twitter, a lot of people don't get Twitter, we still use Twitter. And it is incredibly valuable. If you had invested in the early days of Twitter, would you be a happy investor today? And the answer is, of course. If you invested early days of Facebook or Google or Apple, any of these things you would have the success. So in the time that I have with you before we bring up our next speaker, and I'm really looking forward to listening to our speakers today. We have obviously Jeffrey Tucker on after me, and I had a chance to listen to Jeffrey at the Miami Bitcoin conference in January, and he was one of the best speakers there. That's why I invited him to be here today. They only gave him 20 minutes there, which everyone was really disappointed. And I said to Jeffrey, trust me, you won't have more than 20 minutes. I'm going to give you an hour. And if you want, you can even go longer, because what he has to share on Bitcoin is phenomenal. And apart from Jeffrey, I have many great speakers that are here over the next 2 days. And I'm really excited as an advocate of Bitcoin to be able to learn and see this industry emerge. Obviously in Australia, it's a new industry. It's emerging, but there's a lot of entrepreneurial talent being drawn to this industry today. So what I guess I want to share in this presentation, apart from why I see a future in Bitcoin, I want to put my investor cap on and let's look at Bitcoin as an investment. As an investor. Then I want to put my entrepreneur cap on and say, as an entrepreneur, where do we see Bitcoin as a trend, as an opportunity to start up companies or to really support the Bitcoin industry, and where the value is in that. And I'll share some of the things that I've noticed and what I've taken advantage of there. And I guess then we want to answer some of these questions that people have sent in, that people might have, such as, what do you think of Warren Buffett's view on Bitcoin, etc. And what's the future price prediction? Where do you think Bitcoin can go as a price? And what are some of the other uses that Bitcoin can evolve into? These are all interesting questions that people may have. So I know some of you are here, you're interested in already in startups in Bitcoin industry or interested in entering that industry and looking for opportunity. And there certainly is. After coming back from the Bitcoin global conference in Miami, I realized just how rapidly and how fast this industry is emerging. It would have to be one of the fastest growing industries on the planet right now. It reminded me of the dot-com boom, except I refer to it as a dot-com boom, but with legs. It actually has legs, it has substance behind it. And sure, there will be some companies that will come and go in the industry, but it actually has some solid legs behind it. And I see enormous potential, and I'm not just saying that as a commentator, I'm saying that because I'm putting my time and money into it, because I see the opportunity there, and I'm happy to play my part in assisting in the growth of the industry, because I believe it's going to make the world a better place. I've never seen technology yet that has the opportunity, other than perhaps the internet, to make a significant difference to the world that Bitcoin has. We have to look at that. This is a chance to revolutionize the world and change it, make it a level playing field that no other technology perhaps has ever done. And the sooner more people realize that, the sooner the world will be a better place and the sooner it will adopt Bitcoin. Does it make sense? So how do you get Bitcoin? You know, I guess to cover for those who are watching in from around the world or those that are here that really don't know that much about Bitcoin, there's effectively a few ways you can get Bitcoin. You can jot some of these down if you're into taking notes. One way you can get Bitcoin is you can effectively mine it. Is it true? You can effectively download open source software, and there's companies and startups that are involved in Bitcoin mining that are doing quite well. There are stories of people that have got involved into, there's an example of a young guy in America. He started mining Bitcoin in his garage on his home computer some years ago. He forgot about it and then come back and he had $12 million worth of Bitcoin. Who'd like to discover $12 million worth of Bitcoin? Based on the value of Bitcoin a few months ago, that 12 million has grown to about $80 million. So some people have become accidental millionaires already through Bitcoin. There's a story of a Norwegian gentleman that invested the equivalent of $27 Australian into Bitcoin that today is worth $4.5 million. So as an investment, if those who got in early, since I started talking about Bitcoin, I wrote a book, Bitcoin, Is This the Future of Digital Currencies? I first started working on this book several years ago when I first heard about Bitcoin, and I was going to release it. Bitcoin back then was, several years ago, it was only a matter of cents. And I pulled it back because I'm thinking most of the books I've written about have never been about a topic like this. And I thought, well, people think, what the hell is Jamie talking about, this Bitcoin thing? Because back then no one had really heard of it unless you're a total geek or nerd. And I thought, so it delayed me. I hesitated. And it was a year later before I released the book. Now, a lot of my investment followers who I often update with trends, I told my investors to buy gold when it was $200 an ounce, and then it went to almost $2,000 an ounce. I've told people to invest heavily in real estate over the years with future property booms, and they've taken advantage of that. I told people to buy into the US property market, the bottom of the boom. So often I will make predictions, and my followers are generally done very well from those predictions. Many of them were quite upset that I didn't release the book and advise them to invest in Bitcoin when it was a few cents. I didn't make that prediction to start investing into Bitcoin until it reached $120. Last October, September. Back then, I started telling my followers invest in Bitcoin at $120. Now, those who did followed that prediction, they saw Bitcoin go from $120 to $1,242 in the space of 4 weeks and actually overtake the price of gold. So as an investment, if we put our investment caps on, has there been a more successful investment on the planet than Bitcoin? It would be hard to find one. If you invested, $10,000 into Bitcoin when it was like 5 or 10 cents, it would be worth over $100 million today. I don't know about what other stock you could invest in that could generate those sort of returns. So even though Warren Buffett is credible in it as an investment, Bitcoin has outperformed what's his name? His company, Hathaway, as well. So, as great as Warren is as an investor, as an investment, Bitcoin has outperformed that incredibly. That's if we were purely looking at it as an investment. I know some of you are investors, and we'll look at that further as we go through this. But there's an enormous amount of wealth. If you invested $10,000 into Bitcoin a little bit over a year ago, you would have $1 million today. Would anyone wish they could invest $10,000 into Bitcoin a little over a year ago? Even in early October, if you invested $10,000 into Bitcoin, you would have $100,000 as of a few months ago. That would be at least $60,000 still today. So even though some of the media say Bitcoin price has plunged, it's crashed, and you think, okay, we'll go check the price and it's dropped 8%. The fact that Bitcoin is $600 or thereabouts. That's remarkably successful if you'd bought in Bitcoin at 120, or if you bought into Bitcoin at $12 or 12 cents or 1 cent. So that's why people are still bullish about Bitcoin. But remember, most people aren't necessarily just investing in Bitcoin as a way to make money. They want to see how it can improve their business, how can they accept it, what are all the other benefits of it. So you can mine Bitcoin. I've had many teenagers in this country say, Jamie, I started mining it a few years ago, but it was only worth a few cents, so I gave up. They now wish they didn't give up. I talked to a lot of young Australians and people around the world. They were busily mining. They saw an opportunity, but they had no idea that few cents would go to over $1,000 as of late last year. I think personally the days of mining Bitcoin for the individual is pretty much over. I think if you want to be a miner at an individual level, you're probably better off mining some of the new other digital currencies outside of Bitcoin. I think unless you are a bigger player or have the capital to invest and network with computers, I think the opportunity for the average person to make much out of mining, I think we've probably missed that boat. I'm sure many of you agree with that. I could be wrong, but that's just my personal opinion if you want. How else can we get Bitcoin? I guess we can buy it. That would be the simplest way to buy Bitcoin. There's many exchanges. I don't recommend Mt. Gox perhaps as one. But there's many international exchanges that you can buy, simply go out and buy Bitcoin. There's also local exchanges. We launched a Bitcoin exchange last year, primarily because I got sick of answering the question when I started talking about Bitcoin. People say, well, where do I get some from? It's like, I didn't want to, okay, well, go here. You can get it. We'll supply it to you for a fee, of course. So you can simply go out and buy it. The third thing we can do, and I think if you're an entrepreneur here with Bitcoin, is you can accept it. And I think this is where most people will start. If you're an entrepreneur, if you have a product or service in the marketplace, you should be accepting Bitcoin. Why? Well, it's another form of currency, but the main reason you do it right now is that you're going to tap into extra business. Just like many businesses accept barter card because they can get extra business. The difference is barter card is not easily convertible to cash. But imagine another form of barter effectively that you can instantly convert to cash. That's exciting. If you could accept barter card in Australian businesses and convert it to cash quicker than any other method, more people would use barter card. Does that make sense? So if all Bitcoin was a form of barter that's easily converted to cash, that alone has massive potential. So in many of our companies, we've started accepting Bitcoin. We're happy to accept it. Today it was in the Australian media that a real estate company in Sydney has started to accept Bitcoin. We've been accepting, we source US property for some of our investor clients. We accept, Bitcoin for US property. I spoke to some Australian developers this morning. I said, will you consider accepting Bitcoin for people to purchase Australian property? And we hope they'll say yes. I said, worst case, you can accept it. If you're worried about the volatility of Bitcoin, you can simply, cash it in instantly so you don't have that currency fluctuation that stops a lot of people at present from investing in Bitcoin or accepting Bitcoin because they are worried about that fluctuation. But if you're an entrepreneur and accepting Bitcoin, I'm happy to accept Bitcoin. In fact, we're happy to take a 25% discount off the price of products and services to take Bitcoin. Why? Because we have a long-term view on the price of Bitcoin. A lot of people say, Jamie, you're an investor into Bitcoin itself. Do you check or they email me and go, oh, did you hear the price dropped? And I'm like, I don't really follow the price of Bitcoin. Even though I'm a Bitcoin investor, I do not follow the price of Bitcoin. Why? Because if you're a long-term investor, if you believe in Bitcoin in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years is going to be 5, 10, 100 times possibly the value of what it is now, who really cares what the daily fluctuation of Bitcoin is unless you want to become a Bitcoin trader? Just like when Warren Buffett buys a stock, he continually says, I don't care if the stock market is closed for 5 years because he's buying 5, 10-year horizon. Does it make sense? So if you're a long-term investor, I'm bullish on Bitcoin. That's why I went in and bought a lot of Bitcoins. Make sense? So they're pretty much the ways that you can get access to Bitcoin. Quickly turn to the person next to you and share with them which of those ways that you've taken advantage of or may consider taking advantage of. Do that quickly. So let's look at Bitcoin as an investor. I was talking about some of the benefits there. If you're an investor wanting to invest in Bitcoin, If you have a long-term view of Bitcoin, then you'd still see it as value for money. Of course, you'd say, well, I wish I had invested at 120. I wish I had invested at $12, like a bit over a year ago, or 12 cents, or 1 cent. But to be a successful investor, we need more than hindsight. We need foresight. And I've been happy to continue to buy Bitcoins at whatever price, because I believe long term it will be a higher price than what it is today. How do I come up with those assumptions? Well, if we were to look at Bitcoin as a market cap, and I know Gene mentioned a figure of 10 billion, at the moment it's about 7 billion because the price has dropped thereabouts. It's about 6 billion. So the market cap is, let's say 10 billion to keep figures round. That's what it was late last year. It was a bit above that. The market cap for Bitcoin as an entirety is actually incredibly small. Let's round the figures off at about $1,000. When Bitcoin's $1,000, it's worth about, the cap is close to 10 billion. There's 11 million or 12 million Bitcoin, thereabouts, keep the figures simple. So why am I, and I know one of the leading hedge fund managers come out this morning endorsing Bitcoin, and why he's an investor, and he used the same argument that I've been using for quite some time. Well, there's many arguments, but one of the same arguments. As an investor, I have my investment hat on, and this is where I saw opportunity in Bitcoin. And this is why even at $1,000, I was still buying Bitcoin. The point is this, at a 10 billion market cap, that is a tiny speck in the world of money, a tiny speck. To give you an example, gold, the total value of gold is 8.6 trillion. And we're talking 8.6 trillion. Just the value of gold that exists. Now, I'm not here to suggest that Bitcoin will replace all currency. I'm not here to suggest it will become a hedge the size of gold. But what if I was to suggest that Bitcoin has the potential to be an alternate currency, if that's all it amounts to, if it has the potential to be an alternate hedge. For those who want to go back in history, April last year or thereabouts, there was a Cyprus banking crisis, you remember. And up until that time, throughout history, recent history, whenever there was a banking crisis, what would happen to the price of gold? Would it go down or up? Before Cyprus crisis, gold would go up in price. Why? Because it was considered a safe haven. It was a hedge. I mean, other than making jewelry, gold has no real other value other than it's a store of wealth, that perceived value that we place upon it. Just like money. Some people say, well, I don't get Bitcoin because it has no intrinsic value. Well, how much intrinsic value does a US dollar bill have? Oh, but it's backed by the US government. Exactly. Exactly. It has no more value, the US dollar, than the value we place upon it, the trust we place in it. Therefore, Bitcoin has its value, but the trust that we place in it. Wherever there's trust in it, it has value. As the trust increases, the value will go up. Does it make sense? So, gold. The challenge, what happened when the banking crisis in Cyprus occurred, as part of the bailout, they made Cyprus sell a large amount of its gold. What that meant to investors was, hang on, if Italy and Spain and these other basket case economies have a banking crisis and collapse, which is possible or probable, some would say, then that means they're going to be forced to sell their gold, and that's going to put downward pressure on gold. So what happened at that point is money moved not into gold, but moved where? Where did it go to? Where was the only place to go that was outside the banking system that your money could be potentially safe last April in the Cyprus crash? Where did it move to? Take a guess. Bitcoin. Why did it move there? Because there was a banking crash. You don't want your money in the bank. Does it make sense? As the poor people in Cyprus realized, you want the money somewhere else, either in gold, but gold then went down. So people didn't want to put the money in gold, they put it in the Bitcoin, and Bitcoin shot up from, I think, $100 odd to $270 very rapidly. That's when it started to get on the radar initially for a lot of people, because all of a sudden people were looking for another hedge. I'm here to suggest if Bitcoin only ever becomes 1% the value of gold as a hedge, 1% of gold, what's 1% of 8.6 trillion? 86 billion. 86 billion. is that significant room for growth if Bitcoin only become 1% the value of the hedge of gold. That's almost it's an 800 or 900% increase on the price of Bitcoin, assuming it's $1,000 today. If it's at 500 odd, it's that much greater. Does that make sense? At just 1%. What if Bitcoin becomes 10%? The value of gold as a hedge, 10%. Then you're looking at 860 billion. You can do the figures though. You're pretty much looking at a price at 1%. You're looking at a price as high as $10,000 per Bitcoin. At 10% the value of gold, you're looking at a price of 100,000 per Bitcoin. Does it make sense? That's why some of the top smart investors on the planet are recognizing it. Now, Warren Buffett come out and said, well, it was reported that Bitcoin, it's a mirage. Those who haven't seen his comments, what he was actually saying, the comments Warren Buffett actually said, and a lot of people listen to him as far as investment. He said Bitcoin as a form of transfer of money or like a money order or like a check is quite effective. He believes that's quite a good tool for that. He said though, but you don't invest in money orders. Just because money order is a form of paying money or a check, you don't go and invest in that as a currency, so to speak, because it has no real intrinsic value. Now, he's saying that. Now, admittedly, Warren Buffett's also admitted that when it comes to technology, he just doesn't understand technology. Is that true? He said that for several decades. That's why he didn't invest in Apple. That's why he hasn't invested in Google. That's why he hasn't invested in Facebook and Twitter, all great profits for investors that have invested in them, because he simply doesn't understand them. He is old school and he's been very successful at that. So if you're successful, why change? And he'll admit that. So he doesn't see the intrinsic value in investing in Bitcoin itself. But what he did say is, just like the internet, people say it's like the internet, is that you don't invest in the internet. Does it make sense? But what you do invest in is the ecosystem around it. So he said, I can see potential in companies that start up in the Bitcoin industry that help facilitate the growth or the transfer of money through Bitcoin. That's what he actually said. He saw more value as an investor in investing or starting companies that serve that industry. If we put our entrepreneur hat on, that's the other way that we can profit from that industry. When he was referring to a mirage, he was referring to, he doesn't believe the value of Bitcoin can really go up that much. But that's also because he doesn't understand it. As a hedge, Warren Buffett, I believe, whether he likes it or not, in the future, his companies will actually be buying Bitcoin even if he doesn't want to. Why? Because he has many insurance companies, and at some point in the future, it's highly probable there will be future banking crises. Raise your hand if you're confident in the future there will be another banking crisis somewhere in the world. That's a pretty safe bet. Therefore, what will happen is that a lot of companies that have large cash reserves, insurance companies in particular, will be forced to hedge. Be forced to hedge not just into gold and silver, but to hedge into Bitcoin. Why? Because you can't afford, if there's a banking crisis and the value of Bitcoin to go to 10,000 or 100,000, and you don't have a small, very small percentage of your portfolio in it. You simply can't afford not to. So even those who don't believe in Bitcoin will be forced to invest in Bitcoin against their desire, simply because they will put themselves at peril if they don't. Does that make sense? So my prediction is Warren Buffett's companies will at some point invest in Bitcoin. There's a fair chance they won't publicly announce it though, because the reality is that would be seen as a huge endorsement and that would affect the price. Or maybe he will get smart and will invest heavily in it, and then he will publicly announce it and profit from it, from the increase in price. Does that make sense to everyone? That's why I have the view as an investor, Bitcoin as investment in Bitcoin itself as a currency is still a potential long-term profitable investment tool. However, in saying that, I've shifted a lot of my focus as an entrepreneur to investing in startups in the Bitcoin industry, because I see that's where there's even greater potential to profit. And obviously you've seen people such as Mark Anderson and others, Peter Thiel, the early stage investors in Facebook and many of these other successful social media companies. They sold PayPal for a lot of money. and now they're investing in BitPay and companies associated with the Bitcoin industry. Why? Because they see it's going to be the next PayPal. If I was the two industries that I would be concerned about with Bitcoin is Western Union and PayPal. They have the most to lose from the rise of Bitcoin. Why would you pay expensive fees for Western Union to transfer money when now you can do it for free through Bitcoin? Why would, Bitcoin has the opportunity to give literally banking services to poor people in undeveloped countries that don't have access to banking services. They can now receive and send money. There's tremendous opportunities that are available as a result of that. So I think PayPal and Western Union, their model is under threat because of Bitcoin and BitPay and companies like that are becoming very successful, are really challenging that. And that's just one benefit of Bitcoin, is a transfer of money as a transfer system. If all it did was effective at that, the valuation of Bitcoin as itself could be quite significant. If we're looking then at being an entrepreneur, in the industry, there's a lot of potential startups. One of the startups that I'm involved in is bringing ATM machines to Australia. It's not the first idea. Many people have had this idea, but I was approached by investment bankers on my boat actually in January this year on holidays, and they said, Jamie, we hear you're heavily bullish on Bitcoin and you're involved in that industry and you intend bringing ATMs to Australia. We would like to be a part of that as a company, and how about we bring 100 to Australia and then roll out thousands around the world? And I said, you know what, I'm happy to have you on board and work together as a group of partners to see that happen. Why? I'm bullish on Bitcoin. I'm also bullish because when the difference is when the average person can simply walk up to an ATM machine down here in Collins Street in the next couple of weeks, or in Pitt Street in Sydney in the next couple of weeks. And for those skeptics out there who don't think these ATM machines are going to roll out around the country, I can tell you, and even the media now, these ATM machines are already here. They have arrived, and there's also, we're planning on having one here by tomorrow as well. But they are in the country. The only reason they're not in the street yet because we're putting some stickers on them and we're doing our final tests. But they are here. It's real. It is happening. And Australia, I think, is an early adopter of technology, and I think Australians will take it up. The first RoboKind ATM machine in Vancouver, you might be aware of the statistics, in the first 45 days did over $2.2 million in turnover. They had queues of people queuing up. It's inside a cafe in Vancouver. Literally people are becoming day traders. People would sit in the cafe all day, go out to the ATM machine when Bitcoin dropped in price, buy the Bitcoins, go back and have some more coffee and wait for the price to rise, because if you know, up until recent months, Bitcoin would jump $300 or $400 in a day, and walk back out and then sell the Bitcoin. It would basically, it's like an exchange. So day traders love it because of that volatility, even though that's disappeared in recent times of volatility. But I think when people realize they can go up to an ATM machine and they go, am I going to pull cash out of my bank account, or am I going to pull cash out of my Bitcoin account? When they can access cash that easily, now it goes from being this thing that they don't fully understand to going, it's just the same as cash. It's just another bank account. It's a digital bank account. Like most of our money is digital now anyhow, it's just numbers in a bank account. I think that will really help the mainstream adoption take off that much more. And that's why we're bullish on believing that ATMs are a critical vehicle to getting Bitcoin into the hands of the average person in this country. And I know there's many others that also want to bring ATMs out to Australia, and that's why we'll be announcing next week an acquisition. We're finalising, or have finalised an acquisition of some of our competitors, because we would like our competitors to work together. I believe in cooperation as opposed to competition, and we have been making acquisitions, and we'll announce some of that in that space next week. And we will announce shortly that our plans are to list on the Australian stock market that particular company as well. There already is a company listed successfully on the ASX, BTC Digital, and they've done quite well and raised, I think, $15 million overseas. I was in New York and Miami. The amount of money for Bitcoin is enormous. People just want to invest in Bitcoin startups if they have some solid legs. So if you're an entrepreneur or a startup, and if you can come up with a worthwhile idea in the industry, there is, and Jeffrey might talk about this as well, but there is a large amount of money globally wanting to invest into Bitcoin startups. I don't know any other industry industry that can attract the amount of capital readily available than Bitcoin can right now. It's what was called in investment banker friends that I have, they call it hot money. Whether it's hot money or not, it's hot. And why something's hot, I would suggest if you're an entrepreneur, what should you do? Take advantage of it. That's what I'm doing. As an industry, it has massive media attention ever since October last year. So any business involved in Bitcoin will also get media attention. Some of that media attention will be good, some will be bad. Who really cares? The fact that they're writing about Bitcoin, the fact that Warren Buffett's talking about Bitcoin, the Reserve Bank chairmen are talking about Bitcoin, it means Bitcoin has arrived. The fact they're talking about it doesn't mean whether they're positive or negative, it doesn't matter. The fact they're talking about it is good for the industry. Does that make sense? And that's why I continue to remain excited about it. With my followers, I've told my investment followers, if there's something changes in the world of Bitcoin that changes my view about it, I will put it on Facebook and I'll put it on 21st Century News. I'll put it out there and clearly state my views have now changed on Bitcoin because of this, this, and this. It's not like that I have any other people say, well, Jamie, you have a vested interest. That's why you're talking about Bitcoin. No, I'm just putting my money where my mouth is and not just talking about it like a lot of commentators or journalists will talk about it but have no money at stake. I have money at stake in the Bitcoin industry because I believe in it. Does that make sense? The idea that an individual can talk up the Bitcoin industry is really a little bit absurd. The industry is way too big for any individual now, unless you're Warren Buffett, to be able to talk up the industry. Does that make sense? I can say whatever I like about Bitcoin. I don't think it's going to cause the price to jump today because Jamie McIntyre in Melbourne says he's bullish about Bitcoin. Does that make sense? So you can't really talk up the industry. So that's just absurd. I'm talking up the industry no more because I believe in the industry. I'm very passionate about that for those reasons. The other things that we're doing in Bitcoin, I'm involved in a startup which I founded, is a Bitcoin network, which you'll hear a little bit about after lunch with one of the presenters. At the end of the day, if Bitcoin's going to adopt mainstream adoption, someone has to educate the masses about Bitcoin. I see tremendous, as an education and media organisation, we have been educators for 15 years and brought a lot of innovative financial strategies to the marketplace. And we see that as our role with the Bitcoin network as a global education resource to make it available to more and more people, to actually educate the everyday person in the street. What is Bitcoin? How does it work? How can you benefit from it as an individual? How can it make your life easier? How can it save you money, etc.? Because unless there's a lot of startups in many areas in the Bitcoin industry, but there's not enough in the education space, someone has to educate the masses about Bitcoin, and I see tremendous opportunity in that. After lunch today, we'll give you a copy of the first Australian Bitcoin Inc. magazine. It's hot off the press. It's arriving today. I haven't even seen it myself. But Bitcoin Inc. is another initiative by 21st Century Media. We produce in this country 6 different magazines: Wealth Creator, Your Trader's Edge, Think and Grow Rich, Property Inc., releasing a female magazine as well for the women out there, and Bitcoin Inc. is the latest stable of magazines to 20th Century Media. It'll be in newsagents later in April as well, and each and every one of you will get a copy of that today. So that's another part of what we're involved in helping spread the word about Bitcoin and the future that it has. Let's look at some questions. First of all, I might open up to some questions. Does anyone have any particular questions you might want to ask about Bitcoin, where you see it going, price predictions, anything? Okay, we'll start down the front. Do we have a microphone, team? Just so those people that are watching live streaming or watching it on record later know what the question is. Otherwise, just ask it and I'll repeat it. Yes. Yeah, that's a good question. So, saying is that, I talked about healthy competition is good, and Bitcoin is competition to payment systems, the banking system. What is the potential competition that might emerge to Bitcoin? For those who don't know, Bitcoin is only one form of digital currency. There's dozens and dozens of other forms of digital currency. There's Litecoin, which is considered, the Bitcoin's the gold, Litecoin's the silver, so to speak. There's WorldCoin, there's QuarkCoin, there's Dogecoin, there's Snoopy Dog Coin. There's unlimited amount of different digital currencies. So other thing Warren Buffett said, well, there's no barrier to entry. Anyone can start a digital currency. However, in saying that, Bitcoin is about 98.7% of the digital currency market. So it doesn't really have any real competition at this point. Are one of those other digital currencies going to overtake it? Well, we're bullish on the digital currency and cryptocurrency. So if it does, who cares? The fact is that we want to see the benefits of Bitcoin and what Bitcoin represents, whether it's in other digital currencies, succeed. So just like with our ATM machines, they'll be able in the future, they're set up to be able to accept other digital currencies as well. So that will not be a problem for the adoption of that, and I think that will be good. The banks know about the currency, but in saying that, the banks, there's some comments we might put up on the screen by NAB and some of the banks, what they have said about Bitcoin. But I do find it interesting is that the banks play games. NAB has said Bitcoin are valuable because they exist, because people believe it, that it may be so. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And you can see some of the other comments by some of the banks there. But the Australian banks, they obviously have had high-level talks about Bitcoin pretty much like any, people around the world and the Federal Reserve, etc. I was in New York when they had the inquiry into Bitcoin. But I know in Australia, I can tell you now, the banks are playing games. They're making it very difficult, and they've shut down many bank accounts or refused to open bank accounts for Bitcoin operators, for Bitcoin startups. I think it's really childish, it's silly. What are they hoping to achieve? They are legitimate businesses. They need a bank account, but if you're that threatened by a tiny new emerging player that you're not going to open bank accounts for a new industry, then it really says that they are generally concerned about the emergence of Bitcoin. And so they should be, because once the masses realize that they can, why in the 21st century? I don't know what it's like in America, but why in the 21st century should you as a customer of Australian banks wait 3 days for a check to clear? Can someone explain that to me? In the age of technology, banks are telling us it takes 3 days for a check to clear. That's absolute nonsense. That's a monopoly that can deliver such poor service, that can charge you so much for anything that you do with them and think they can get away with it. Well, I'm glad that the banks now has some healthy competition. And I don't think Australians are pretty much into supporting the underdog, and Bitcoin is the underdog. And I think as people understand it, there's more reason to be positive about it. I think the only people that are pretty negative about Bitcoin are simply the people that don't understand it. And good luck to them, but that's part of the process. Most people that are they're so-called experts, they don't want to admit they don't know something. So they rather make out they do know something and be seen as an expert and discredit something they have little knowledge about. If they want to discredit Bitcoin, please put up a valid argument. We're happy to see a valid argument. Now, some will say, Jamie, but what about Mt. Gox? Mt. Gox imploded and Bitcoin, therefore, is going to fail. Well, when Mt. Gox imploded, did I get nervous about my Bitcoin holdings? I didn't lose a night's sleep. It didn't bother me in the slightest. Why? Many people in the industry knew Mt. Gox was having problems, and why would you leave your money with Mt. Gox anyhow? You tried to open up an account with Mt. Gox, it was a nightmare. So a lot of people weren't worried about that. Sure, and that was Mt. Gox's poor management, poor running of a business. That was not Bitcoin. Now, some of the media are doing a lot of interviews, whether it's Sky News or radio. They'll say, well, what about the regulation on Bitcoin? Won't that change it? I'm going, well, yes, I'm supportive of regulation. I know there's some supporters of Bitcoin that are anti-regulation. Well, we invited ASIC and the ATO to present this weekend, and ASIC did come back and say they just pretty much paraphrase that they don't have their final determination on what they're going to do around or how they view the regulatory framework of Bitcoin. So they simply don't have anything to say yet. I assume ASIC will wait to see what other regulatory bodies around the world do. The ATO is far more aggressive. We would like them to come in and tell us why they're going to taxes like GST, or in the US has just come out why they're going to tax us as a form of property. That is creating some uncertainty around Bitcoin, is that the way that they're going to be. But as an advocate of Bitcoin, I think I'm supportive of regulation as long as it's not over-regulation. Australia is known as a bit of a nanny state for those international visitors, which is a little bit sad. We need to really cut out a lot of regulation. So I'm supportive of regulation if it's if intelligent regulation. But I said to some of the media, I said, let's not fool ourselves that regulation is going to protect people. Has the banking systems been regulated for how long? Did that stop Bear Stearns imploding, Lehman Brothers imploding and losing people's money? Last year, a Spanish bank in Victoria lost $600 million of Victorians' money, savings. Did it stop the state credit societies that have imploded over the years in Victoria and South Australia? Has it stopped the Rothwell Bank collapsing in Perth years ago? So even though the banking system is heavily regulated, has it stopped banking failures? No. It's designed to prevent them or reduce them, but it doesn't stop them. So the idea regulation is going to protect everyone is just an illusion. Let's face the reality. The only thing that will protect consumers on anything is education. The more educated we are about how to store safely our Bitcoins and not have them connected to on the computer that's connected to the internet. You store your money safely, so you've got to learn to store your Bitcoin safely. Does that make sense? People say, what about the security threats? Yes, the weakness of Bitcoin is probably the potential hacking and security issues with that. But I believe there's enough people heavily invested in Bitcoin and they're already working on improved solutions of that. But let's put it in perspective. There's more fraud and there's more risk to using credit cards to being defrauded and the current banking system than there is to Bitcoin. Does that make sense? So even there's some security issues and hacking issues with Bitcoin compared to the current monetary system we use and forms of payment, it actually is less. So let's keep things in perspective. You don't stop using your credit card because the amount of fraud on credit cards is at record high. The people can write out fake checks and have money stolen out of your bank account. I mean, I remember having hundreds of thousands of dollars illegally taken from some of my bank accounts. It took me 6 months to get the bank to reverse that transaction, even though they were at fault. So there is errors and fraud that happens in the current banking system. So let's keep things in perspective. Yes, there is some weaknesses to any system, but I believe there's enough people that believe and working collectively with developers around the world with open source software to make those improvements. Even Mt. Gox has discovered that how much of their Bitcoins actually went missing. They've discovered some of them aren't missing, and I think you'll find more to the story that not as many went missing as you think. They might have went missing to someone's bank account. That's about all. They still exist. So yes, there's been some problems with Bitcoin, but nothing that's changed my viewpoint. Nothing's has changed me to stop buying Bitcoin. Nothing's has changed me to invest in Bitcoin. Any other questions? Does anyone have any other questions before I wrap up and we hear from Jeffrey? Over here, we'll just get a microphone quickly.
Is that on? Can you talk about how you're securing your Bitcoin once you've purchased it? It's something that everyone's sort of thinking about at the moment. What's a safe way of storing it? A cold storage, printing it off, putting it into a safe, that kind of thing?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm not the best person to ask that question because I'm really not a geek. When it comes to things like that, I have no idea. I have my people store it safely. I just know enough to know you don't leave it on a computer that's connected to the internet. The Winklevoss twins, they've invested reportedly $11 million into Bitcoin. They're big believers in the industry. We did, hope to have them speak this weekend, but they're unavailable. And they have the example, they have it on disk and they have it in safety deposit box in 3 separate banks. So in case one bank burns down or something. The point is that if you want to protect your money, the more you have, the more you want to protect it. Some of the other speakers might be able to cover that this weekend. They would be better to answer that. Any other questions before we wrap up? Yep.
In my opinion, I think the thing that's hamstringing Bitcoin the most is the constant discussion about the price of Bitcoin. I think it's a lot more important to be on TV preaching the benefits of Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Where do you see the future of the conversation on the media? Is it going to stay focused on price, or will it start moving to, trying to teach people what Bitcoin is and giving people understanding of why it's $500 a coin at the moment?
Yeah, I think it's a very good question, and I think you'll find the media, the media will write things that attract readers, and the media like Bitcoin because people like reading about it. So overall, the media's been relatively supportive of Bitcoin to a large degree. They'll have the pros and cons, and that's what they're there to do, to ask questions and create debate. But a lot of the media now is switching to what are the potential benefits of Bitcoin away from the price. And I think what's happened in the last few months, because the price has been much more stable, is that when you see prices go from $120 to $1,200 in the space of a month, of course, that's how the mainstream media become enthralled with Bitcoin, because people were becoming accidental millionaires. It was like a gold rush, and some people did make a lot of money. But I think now we are starting to see a more stabilized price. I think it surprises a lot of people, the floor that there is under Bitcoin. No matter what happens, there's a pretty strong floor. And now we'll start shifting to the other benefits. And many of the speakers today will talk about, and tomorrow, what are some of those other benefits? As I talked about, just as a payment system that's superior to PayPal or Western Union, there's benefit there. But there's other benefits as far as, virtual contracts and things they see that it may even have a better use than what a lot of people currently see. The fact that, we can save fees by trading. We don't have to go through an intermediary with a bank. We can trade with each other and share and purchase and sell Bitcoins between each other. So, yeah, I think it is shifting to that now as people become more educated. But remember, a lot of people still haven't heard of Bitcoin. When you become involved in it, you read about Bitcoin every day, you assume that everyone knows about it. The media is doing a good job, I think, to let people know about it, but the whole Mt. Gox thing scares a lot of people because if we don't know about it, we're easily scared by the uninformed. Any other questions? Raise your hand if you're still bullish about Bitcoin. Very good. So I'll come and we're going to do a Q&A at the end of each day with a speaker panel, and then I'll have some closing comments tomorrow afternoon. Tonight there is drinks at 5:30. You're all invited to networking drinks, level 4 here at the Arts in Hilton. We'll keep you updated where that is. That's when we finish today, so you're all invited to drinks to network with that. So it's been great chatting with you. I hope that's given you some food for thought on the potential of Bitcoin, why many of us are bullish about Bitcoin, and where we see the opportunities in the future. And I look forward to talking to you at the end of the event, and I hope you enjoy the next 2 days, and I hope you enjoy the next speaker. I'm looking forward to hearing what Jeffrey has to say.